I was just finishing my morning coffee when I saw it. A shadow moving across the edge of my property, something enormous cutting through the dust like it belonged to another world. At first, I thought it was one of the stray cattle that had wandered from the neighboring ranch. But no cow, or even a steer, could move like that. My chest tightened when I realized what I was looking at. A black horse, massive beyond reason, pulling a covered wagon alone across my land. No driver. No one guiding it. Just the animal and its cargo, moving with a precision that seemed almost unnatural. I've lived here for over 30 years, and I've seen some strange things. Storms that came out of nowhere, rattlesnakes in places they shouldn't be, and enough abandoned homesteads to know the land has its secrets, but nothing prepared me for this. The horse was enormous, easily 17 hands, with muscles coiled under a black coat that glinted in the morning sun. Its hooves struck the dry dirt in perfect rhythm, each thud echoing in the empty air, while the wagon it dragged groaned under the strain of its load. Whoever or whatever had hitched that wagon to this horse had overestimated the animal's strength, yet somehow it continued forward without hesitation. I set my coffee down on the porch, tin clattering against the weathered wood, and squinted through the haze. The wagon left deep ruts in the earth, each groove a testament to the weight it carried. And there was a sound coming from inside the wagon, subtle, weak, almost drowned out by the creaking wheels and pounding hooves. It wasn't the shuffle of cargo settling. It was human. I could feel it before I even recognized it, a faint groan, desperate and trembling. I grabbed my hat and headed down the porch steps, boots kicking up dust as I followed the creature at a cautious distance. The horse moved with purpose, almost like it knew exactly where it needed to go. It turned corners with the precision of a mount trained for the cavalry, and yet there was no one giving it commands. The sound from the wagon grew slightly louder as I drew closer, my stomach twisting with each step. Whoever was inside needed help, and fast. The wagon veered toward the rocky ridge that cut through the center of my land. I cursed under my breath. That narrow passage was a death trap in the heat of midday. If the person inside was seriously injured, they wouldn't last an hour. I scrambled up a nearby rise to get a better vantage point, my boots slipping on loose stones. From there, I could see the full scale of the horse and wagon. The massive animal's shoulders brushed against the rocks, its strides measured and controlled. My gut told me someone was trapped inside, and from the sounds, badly hurt. Blood. There had to be blood. As I descended the rocks toward the path, I realized the reality of what I was witnessing. This wasn't a runaway animal or a stolen wagon. This was a mission. Someone had trained that horse to carry out a specific task, deliver someone or something somewhere, and they had left it to do the job alone. My mind raced. Who would leave a person in such peril and trust a horse alone? And who, or what, was inside that wagon? The wagon turned again, disappearing briefly behind a cluster of boulders, and I risked a sprint. Every step was agony against the rocky terrain, but I couldn't let the horse get away. Whoever it was inside the wagon didn't have time to wait. The faint cries became a little clearer, a woman's voice, fragile and strained, calling out in almost inaudible whispers. My heart clenched. She was barely conscious. Whoever she was, she had survived an ordeal and was still alive, but barely. I reached the edge of the rock formation just as the wagon re-emerged into view. The horse's mane was glossy in the sunlight, and its eyes gleamed with intelligence, something I had rarely seen in an animal. This was no ordinary horse. Every muscle in its body seemed to hum with determination. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the horse was trained to follow commands. Its loyalty wasn't just instinct, it had been taught. I dropped to my knees in the dust, considering my next move. I could try to intercept the wagon before it reached wherever it was going, but the narrow canyon left me little room to maneuver. The woman's cries were fading, her strength draining with every second the wagon rolled forward. I couldn't leave her out there to die, not with the horse so determined to continue on its path. I had a choice: follow the horse and hope it didn't take her too far, or intervene now and risk startling the animal, and potentially her, into something far worse. My mind flashed back to all the lessons I'd learned about horses over decades of ranching. Patience, calm, authority. A horse this trained could be reasoned with, but only carefully, and only if I knew what commands it recognized. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and began closing the distance. The sun beat down on my back, the dust clinging to sweat-slicked skin, but I pushed on. Whoever had set this mission in motion, whether they lived or had died before its completion, had trusted that horse with everything. And now, the weight of that trust fell onto me. The next steps I took could mean the difference between life and death. I had to reach the wagon, slow it, and save her before the desert claimed another victim. I sprinted across the uneven ground, my boots sinking into loose dirt and gravel, keeping the wagon and the massive horse in sight. Every step sent sharp pains through my legs, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The sun climbed higher, scorching the barren land, and I could see the sweat glistening on Thunder's black coat. The horse's head was low, ears flicking constantly, muscles rippling under skin as it pulled the heavily laden wagon with effortless precision. There was no hesitation, no faltering. Whatever this animal had been trained to do, it executed flawlessly, like a soldier on a mission it had known its entire life. The faint moans from inside the wagon grew weaker, and my stomach turned. Whoever was inside, they were in terrible shape. I caught a glimpse of a pale hand protruding from beneath the canvas as the wagon tilted over a shallow rut. Blood, I realized, streaked through the dust. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just some minor scrape or a frightened passenger. It was a life hanging by a thread. The horse's hooves struck the earth with measured force, keeping the wagon moving straight and true, as if it could feel the urgency of the situation. I closed the distance slowly, careful not to startle the massive animal. Years on the ranch had taught me one thing. Horses sense fear and desperation, and Thunder. He was no ordinary horse. Whoever had trained him had instilled a singular purpose in his instincts, and I had no idea how to override it. The canyon ahead narrowed, the walls rising like jagged teeth from the earth, and I knew if the wagon went through unimpeded, I might lose my chance to intercept it. I ducked behind a boulder, catching my breath, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The woman's cries were intermittent now, faint wisps that twisted my stomach into knots. Whoever she wasn't going to last long in this heat without immediate help. I needed a plan, a way to slow the horse without endangering her further. The wagon creaked as it descended a shallow slope, wheels grinding over loose stone, and I realized the bindings on the canvas were tight, military grade. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure whatever, or whoever, was inside couldn't escape. Time was slipping away, and every second counted. I had to reach that wagon, and I had to do it carefully. One wrong move, and both the horse and the woman could be lost forever. My hands clenched into fists as I studied the terrain, looking for a way to guide Thunder without fighting his training entirely. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this horse was following the last instructions of a man who had already sacrificed everything for the person inside. That thought hit me hard. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about honoring someone else's final act of loyalty and love. I adjusted my approach, keeping the wagon in view while I crept across a narrow ledge above the canyon floor. Sweat ran down my face, burning my eyes, but I didn't dare wipe it away. I needed all my senses focused. The horse's breathing was steady, calm, almost eerily confident. It didn't glance back, didn't waver. Only the faint, labored groans from the canvas told me there was still a fragile human life inside. and that realization made my pace quicken, even as the rocks threatened to unseat me with every step. I had no choice. I had to intercept this wagon before the canyon funneled it out of reach, and I had to do it without spooking the horse, or worse, causing it to panic. Every instinct I had screamed to run, to dive in, to grab the reins and take control, but I knew this was no ordinary rescue. This required strategy, patience, and a deep understanding of the bond between man and animal. The sun was relentless overhead, beating down on my back, but I ignored the pain, the heat, the exhaustion. Whoever was inside the wagon needed me, and I couldn't fail. Not now. I drew closer, boots scraping against loose stone as the wagon crested a small rise. My lungs burned, but exhaustion didn't matter. I had to see who, or what, was inside. A narrow gap in the canvas revealed a pale face pressed against the wooden floor of the wagon. Her hair was matted, darkened with sweat and streaked with dust. Every shallow breath she took seemed like a battle against death itself. I could see the red stains spreading across the cloth, the crude bandages barely keeping them at bay. Someone had tried to help her, but it wasn't enough. She needed proper care, and time was running out. Thunder, the horse, paused briefly as if sensing me, nostrils flaring, massive hooves shifting in the dirt. I froze. This was no ordinary animal. It reacted not only to commands but to intention. I couldn't simply rush in. I had to earn its cooperation. Slowly, I stepped closer, careful to avoid sudden movements, my voice low and calm. The faint groan from inside the wagon came again, weak but unmistakably human. Whoever she was, she knew she was alive, but barely. That sound tightened something in my chest, a mix of fear and determination. I noticed something else then, the way the wagon was packed. The canvas was tied down with precision, ropes pulled tight at exact intervals. Fresh scratches on the wood suggested someone had fastened her inside only recently. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this, and the horse had been programmed to follow a route, likely to a safe haven. But now, with the woman struggling to survive inside and the canyon narrowing ahead, I realized her fate depended on whether I could override that programming without alarming Thunder. I took a deep breath and considered my options. I could try to grab the reins, but that might spook him. Or I could position myself where he could see my intent, commanding with authority instead of force. I whispered to myself, remembering how Marcus might have trained him. Commands had to be clear, deliberate, familiar. And yet, I had no idea what words this horse recognized. All I knew was that whatever mission Marcus had set in motion was still alive in Thunder, and it was my responsibility now to ensure it didn't end in tragedy. The canyon walls loomed closer. Time was slipping through our fingers. The wagon's creaks and the horse's heavy breaths punctuated the tension, while the woman's shallow groans reminded me every second counted. Whoever she was, she had survived this far because of loyalty. Marcus's loyalty, I guessed, and now that trust had been passed to me. Every instinct told me to act, but I had to act wisely. One wrong move could turn hope into disaster. I slowed my pace, keeping a careful distance, and studied Thunder. His dark eyes were fixed forward, muscles tense, ears flicking back toward me but never fully acknowledging my presence. I knew I couldn't force him to stop. Not with sheer strength, not with haste. This horse wasn't just trained. He was conditioned to follow orders that had likely cost a man his life. My hands clenched the reins I'd picked up from the ground earlier, hoping the familiar weight might help convey my intent. Slowly, I stepped closer, calling softly to the massive animal, my voice steady, deliberate. The groans from the wagon grew more urgent, each one a painful reminder that the woman inside was running out of time. Sweat dripped into my eyes, stinging, but I forced myself to focus. I could see her now, pale and weak, pressed against the wagon floor, her breathing shallow. Someone had bound her tightly, and the makeshift bandages were soaked with fresh blood. Whoever had put her here hadn't just left her. They had trusted that the horse would see her safely to wherever Marcus had planned. Thunder shifted his weight, but did not move forward. His ears twitched, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled like springs ready to obey. I whispered, careful to maintain authority without aggression. I had no idea if the words would matter, only that my presence and intention might give him the signal he needed. Slowly, inch by inch, I approached the wagon, careful to stay within his line of sight without making sudden moves. My mind raced, trying to imagine what Marcus might have done in this exact moment. The canyon walls grew closer, narrowing the space we had to work with. I knew if I failed here, the wagon, and the woman inside, would be funneled into a section of land where I couldn't reach them. My pulse hammered in my ears as I considered the possibilities. There was no time for mistakes. I had to find the balance between control and trust. If Thunder sensed fear or panic, he would keep going, unrelenting, carrying her toward an uncertain fate. I took a deep breath and spoke again, firmer this time, my voice carrying the authority I hoped the horse would recognize. The groans from inside the wagon hit me like a physical blow. Whoever she was, she had survived this far because of devotion, Marcus's devotion, and now it was up to me to honor it. Thunder hesitated, nostrils flaring, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in his massive eyes. Just a flicker, but enough to know that he could be guided. Slowly I edged closer, every step a test of patience and instinct. The mission had shifted. I wasn't just chasing a wagon. I was entering a delicate negotiation with a living, breathing machine of loyalty. Thunder's massive body tensed as I moved closer, every muscle coiled like steel springs. I could feel the raw power beneath that black coat, the strength of an animal trained for impossible tasks. One misstep, one sudden movement, and the wagon could plunge into the canyon or spook the horse into a deadly sprint. I had to find the right balance, authority without force, guidance without fear. Slowly, I edged closer, speaking in low, calm tones, letting my presence register. From the gap in the canvas, I could see her more clearly now. A young woman, face pale and streaked with sweat, her dark hair clinging to her bloodied skin. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, each exhale a struggle. I saw the crude bandages soaked through with red, realizing that time was running out. Whoever had put her in that wagon had done so with precision and care, but the desert sun and exhaustion were unrelenting. Every second she remained inside, her life slipped further from grasp. Thunder's ears flicked back toward me, nostrils flaring as if questioning my intent. I knew the animal's loyalty had been trained to obey a single mission, yet I had to convince him to adjust his course. Slowly, deliberately, I positioned myself where he could see my movements clearly, signaling direction without threatening the wagon or its precious cargo. My pulse pounded. The canyon narrowed ahead, leaving no room for error. As I inched closer, the woman groaned again, a faint whisper of life that cut through the rhythmic thud of hooves. Whoever she was, she had survived something brutal, something that had left her bound and bloodied, yet she remained alive. That sound fueled my determination. I couldn't let her die here, not when Marcus had trusted this horse to carry her to safety. The responsibility had passed to me. With careful precision, I stepped forward and reached the reins, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Thunder shifted under my touch, and I felt a flicker of recognition, a hesitation that could be manipulated into cooperation. Slowly, I guided him, keeping my movements calm, deliberate, confident. The canyon walls loomed close, but I had a moment, a precious, fleeting moment, to redirect the horse and save her life before the land funneled us into danger. I finally reached the wagon and laid my hands on the reins, feeling the raw power thrumming beneath my fingers. Thunder didn't bolt, but his massive head lifted, ears flicking toward me with suspicion. I whispered calmly, trying to convey intent without force. Slowly, deliberately, I guided him to halt his relentless march. The moment stretched, every muscle in the horse coiled like tensioned rope, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then, with a careful nudge and a firm, steady voice, the giant black horse finally slowed. Peering under the canvas, I saw her fully now. The woman's face was pale, streaked with sweat and grime, eyes fluttering half-closed, and chest rising and falling with shallow, uneven breaths. Blood had soaked through the crude bandages at her side and shoulder, and every inch of her screamed desperation. Whoever had placed her here had done so with care, but the desert and relentless journey had taken their toll. She needed help immediately, and the canyon narrowed ahead, leaving me no time to waste. I took a moment to breathe, trying to steady my own nerves, and assessed the situation. The horse remained tense but obedient, muscles rippling under my touch, ears flicking toward every sound. I could feel his loyalty, hardwired into him by someone long gone, and understood that Marcus had left instructions in the animal's instincts. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This horse was carrying not just a woman, but the legacy of a man's final sacrifice. The groans from inside the wagon tugged at me, and I pressed gently against her shoulder to reassure her without causing pain. Whoever she was, she had survived some unimaginable terror, and now it was my turn to keep her alive. Carefully, I began adjusting the canvas to get a better view of her injuries, my heart tightening at the sight. Blood had seeped through multiple layers of bandages, the kind of wounds that could turn fatal if not treated immediately. Thunder stamped impatiently, sensing the urgency, but I kept my hands firm on the reins. Slowly, I guided the horse away from the narrowing canyon toward a safer, flatter stretch of land where I could attend to her without risking another fall or jolt. Every step required finesse, balancing authority with respect for the animal's training and instinct. One wrong move could end everything, the horse's trust, her fragile life, or both. I guided Thunder to a flatter stretch of land, each careful step keeping the massive wagon from jolting and worsening her injuries. The woman groaned faintly, her breaths shallow, but I could see life still flickering in her eyes. Sweat and blood mixed on her pale skin, and the crude bandages were soaked through. Whoever had tended to her before had tried their best under impossible circumstances, but the desert and the relentless journey had undone their efforts. Every moment counted, and I had to act quickly. Gently, I adjusted the canvas to get a better look at her. She was young, maybe in her mid-twenties, with dark, matted hair clinging to her face. Her hands bore faint red marks, likely from ropes that had bound her to the wagon, and her clothes were torn, streaked with blood and dirt. My heart clenched. Whoever had done this wasn't just violent. They had been methodical, precise, and cruel. Yet beneath the immediate terror, I could sense traces of care, a desperate attempt to keep her alive. Thunder remained steady, though his massive head swung slightly, ears alert, as if aware of the gravity of the situation. His training ran deep, and it hit me. This horse wasn't just following orders. He was carrying the last instructions of a man who had sacrificed everything to save this woman. Marcus. I whispered the name aloud, almost as if saying it would summon him, and the horse flicked an ear toward me. That single recognition, that connection, strengthened my resolve. I was now responsible for completing a mission that Marcus had begun but couldn't finish. The woman groaned again, weaker this time, and I realized the blood loss was critical. I had to stabilize her before she faded completely. My hands moved with careful precision, opening the bandages to inspect the wounds. There were 2 bullet entries, one in the side, one in the shoulder, and the makeshift dressings were nearly useless. I had treated cattle wounds far worse than this, but a human was different. There was no room for error. Every movement had to be deliberate, measured, and quick enough to prevent further deterioration. As I worked, I couldn't shake the image of Marcus in my mind, the man who had trained Thunder, orchestrated this entire rescue, and ultimately sacrificed his own life to give this woman a chance. The weight of that trust pressed on me like a physical force. If I failed, it wouldn't just be her life at stake. I would be failing a promise that had been embedded in the instincts of this horse, a promise made by a man who would never see it fulfilled. Thunder's hooves shifted restlessly in the dirt, muscles coiled beneath his black coat, as I worked quickly to stabilize the woman inside the wagon. Each breath she took was shallow, rattling, and her moans grew weaker with every passing second. I tore strips from my own shirt to reinforce the soaked bandages, pressing them firmly against the bullet wounds. The heat of the desert sun burned my skin, sweat dripping into my eyes, but I ignored it. There was no time for pain. Every second mattered. I could feel the weight of Marcus's mission pressing down on me. This wasn't just about saving a woman from a dangerous group. It was about honoring the final act of a man who had sacrificed everything. The horse beneath me, massive and powerful, had been trained to obey without question, to carry out the instructions of someone who would never return. I whispered to Thunder, gentle but firm, trying to communicate the urgency without breaking the animal's focus. He responded with subtle shifts in posture, acknowledging my presence while remaining steadfast in his loyalty. The woman's eyes fluttered open for a moment, catching mine. Fear and pain were etched across her face, but there was a flicker of recognition, an understanding that she wasn't alone anymore. I pressed a hand to her forehead, feeling the heat of her feverish skin, and murmured reassurances, though my own voice trembled with urgency. The canyon ahead loomed, jagged and narrow, threatening to funnel us into danger. I had to guide Thunder carefully, ensuring that each step would not jostle her fragile form. I worked swiftly, the makeshift bandages tightened, the bleeding slowed, and I felt a small surge of relief. The woman's breathing stabilized slightly, though still uneven, and I knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Marcus had trusted this horse to carry her across miles of dangerous terrain, and now I had assumed that responsibility. One wrong move could undo everything. The desert stretched endlessly around us, unforgiving, yet I felt a strange clarity in the chaos. Every action, every careful adjustment, was a lifeline, a way to honor the trust placed in me by a man I'd never met. Thunder shifted again, nostrils flaring, as if sensing the critical nature of the moment. I guided him gently, whispering commands I hoped he would recognize, steering the wagon toward a safer stretch of land where I could continue tending to her injuries. The woman's groans were faint now, but life still clung stubbornly to her. Marcus's sacrifice, his meticulous planning, and the horse's unwavering loyalty all converged on this fragile thread of survival. I had to succeed. Failure wasn't an option. I guided Thunder carefully to a flat stretch of land just beyond a cluster of boulders, a small haven of relative safety amidst the unforgiving desert. The wagon creaked to a halt, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The woman inside, Maggie, as she had whispered before, lay motionless for a moment, her shallow breaths barely audible over the soft wind rustling through the rocks. I knelt beside her, adjusting the makeshift bandages again, pressing firmly to slow the persistent bleeding. The crude cloths had done what they could, but without proper treatment, she wouldn't survive the journey if we didn't move soon. Thunder stood patiently, enormous and imposing, yet calm. The intelligence in his dark eyes was remarkable, the loyalty embedded deep by Marcus, the man who had trusted this horse to carry out his final act of love and protection. I reached a hand toward the reins and whispered softly, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. Marcus's meticulous planning had left a trail of hope embedded in this horse's training, and I knew now that every decision I made would honor, or betray, that trust. Maggie stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping her lips, and I felt a pang of urgency. Time was running out. The desert sun climbed higher, its heat searing my skin, but I ignored it, focusing solely on stabilizing her for the journey ahead. I tore a strip from my shirt to reinforce the bandages, pressing gently yet firmly against the wounds, my fingers trembling with the responsibility of holding life in my hands. Each breath she took was a reminder of how close she was to slipping away, and how crucial the next steps would be. I glanced at Thunder, the massive black horse, whose loyalty had never wavered, even when his master was gone. Marcus had sacrificed everything, his life, his safety, to ensure Maggie's survival, and now it was my turn to continue that mission. I needed to guide the horse and carry her to real help without breaking the fragile thread of life still holding her together. The canyon behind us, the desert around us, all of it became secondary to the single pressing purpose: keep her alive, reach safety, and honor the man who had trusted us both with this final act. I took a deep breath and climbed onto the wagon beside Thunder, gently guiding the massive horse forward. Each step had to be measured. Too fast, and Maggie's fragile body would suffer. Too slow, and time would slip away. Her shallow breaths echoed faintly beneath the canvas, a constant reminder that every second counted. The desert stretched endlessly before us, sun blazing, rocks and sand threatening to jolt the wagon at any moment. Thunder moved with precision, muscles rippling under his dark coat, a living embodiment of Marcus's final instructions. As we progressed, I kept one hand on the reins, the other pressed against Maggie's side to stabilize her. Her groans were quieter now, almost imperceptible, but they were still there, a heartbeat of life I refused to let go. The bandages were holding, but just barely. I knew that if we didn't reach help soon, all the care Marcus and I had given her would be for nothing. I whispered reassurances to her, though I doubted she could hear me over the creak of the wagon and the steady rhythm of Thunder's hooves. The canyon stretched behind us, a harsh reminder of the peril we had narrowly escaped. Yet I couldn't dwell on the danger past. The road ahead demanded focus. I considered the plan Marcus had likely envisioned, sending the horse with her to safety, but now I realized that plan had been interrupted by circumstance. Marcus had sacrificed himself, leaving both the horse and Maggie in my hands. I felt the weight of that trust pressing down on me with every mile, every jolt, every breath. Thunder's loyalty never wavered. He followed my guidance, adjusting to my subtle commands, yet the intelligence in his dark eyes remained unmistakable. He carried more than a wounded woman. He carried the essence of a man who had loved fiercely and sacrificed everything. Every step forward felt like honoring Marcus's memory, yet I couldn't ignore the urgency pressing against my chest. Maggie's life depended on reaching the ranch alive, and I had to push both horse and wagon to the limit without risking collapse. As the sun climbed higher, the shadows shortening, I finally glimpsed the familiar outline of the ranch buildings in the distance. Relief surged, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the hardest work was still ahead. I had kept her alive this far, but now I had to ensure she survived the final stretch. Every careful maneuver, every gentle touch, was a promise to both Marcus and Maggie that I would not fail. The wagon creaked beneath us, Thunder's massive form undeterred, as we pushed onward toward hope, toward life, toward a chance for her to survive the desert's relentless trial. The ranch came into full view, buildings bathed in the late afternoon sun, and for the first time since I had spotted Thunder dragging the wagon, hope surged through me. Every careful step, every tense moment navigating the canyon and desert, had led to this. I guided the horse onto the flat grounds, steadying the wagon so Maggie could breathe easier. Her groans were faint, but life was still there, stubborn and fragile. I whispered to her, urging her to hold on, promising that help was close. Thunder moved with unwavering discipline, muscles tense but obedient, ears flicking between me and the path ahead. I realized, as I eased the wagon to a stop near the barn, that Marcus had orchestrated more than a rescue. He had left a living testament of his devotion. The horse had carried not only Maggie but also the trust, love, and final intentions of a man who would never see the outcome. I slid down from the wagon, pressed a hand to Maggie's shoulder, and carefully helped her onto solid ground. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and though weak, a spark of recognition and relief passed over her face. We moved quickly into the house, where I could tend to her properly. Clean water, fresh cloths, and a steady hand replaced the improvised care she had endured. Every moment I worked, I thought of Marcus, the sacrifices he had made, the meticulous planning, and the trust he had placed in both me and Thunder. It was more than survival. It was the preservation of a legacy, of love carried across the desert by a horse who had never wavered. Hours passed, and Maggie's breathing steadied, colour slowly returning to her cheeks. I looked toward Thunder, standing patiently outside, still magnificent, still the embodiment of loyalty. I ran my hand along his neck, grateful for the trust between man and animal, and for the gift Marcus had left behind. Maggie stirred again, her hand brushing against the small wooden box Marcus had entrusted to her, the physical remnants of their life together, memories saved from fire and blood. As evening fell, the golden light painting the ranch in warmth, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Maggie was alive. Thunder had completed his mission, and Marcus's sacrifice had not been in vain. I realized, with a weight settling in my chest, that I had witnessed something extraordinary, a testament of love, loyalty, and sacrifice that transcended life itself. That night, as Maggie slept safely for the first time in days, I looked out at the vast expanse of desert, the loyal horse grazing quietly, and understood fully the true measure of devotion. Some stories don't end with heroes surviving. They end with their intentions living on through the lives they touched. Marcus had given everything, and through Thunder and Maggie, his legacy endured. And as I stepped onto the porch, watching the sun sink beneath the horizon, I knew that the desert had witnessed not just survival, but the extraordinary power of love carried on by those who refused to let it die. If you felt the courage and loyalty in this story, click to watch another unforgettable tale from the Wild West, and remember to subscribe, because stories like these are worth keeping alive.